We are military analytics. The developments in the Russia-Ukraine war have clearly revealed the requirements for success in war. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's military personnel and ammunition problems led to his failure against Ukraine. In addition, many problems in Russia and within the Russian army are also causing Putin to lose. So what is the secret of the Ukrainian army's success? What is the driving force behind the killing of nearly 1,000 Russian invaders every day and the destruction of tons of ammunition belonging to the Russian army? Undoubtedly, it is the successful operations of the Ukrainian Air Force. Since the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the Ukrainian army has gained great strength, thanks to the support of Western and European countries rather than equipment such as tanks, armored vehicles, and machine guns. The Ukrainian Air Force's inventory of unmanned aerial vehicles, reconnaissance drones, air defense systems, missiles, and artillery gave Ukraine a great power in the war to the point that almost every day the Ukrainian Air Force announces to the world that it is destroying targets belonging to the Russian invaders. Thanks to the images taken by drone cameras, a new image released the other day has once again revealed the value of the Ukrainian Air Force. In the new images shared on the internet and thousands of social media accounts, it is clearly seen that the commander in the infantry fighting vehicle belonging to the Russian invaders was targeted by the Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle. The Ukrainian drone drops a grenade from a high point on the Russian BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicle. When the grenade hit the vehicle, the invaders inside the vehicle managed to get out of the vehicle quickly. Although the Russian invaders who left the vehicle tried to escape from the area, the second bomb dropped by the Ukrainian drone prevented the Russian invaders from escaping and the invaders from blowing up. As a result of the successful attack of the Ukrainian Air Force, a Russian commander and the soldiers in the wake-up died on the spot. With this attack of the Ukrainian Air Force, the Russian army lost a total of 2,286 infantry fighting vehicles. 304 of these infantry fighting vehicles are BMP-1, hundreds of BMP-2, and 249 BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles to BMP amphibious tracked fighting vehicle is of great importance for the Russian army. The Russian army, which added the BMP-2 and BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicle to its inventory with the strengthening of the BMP-1 version produced during the Soviet period, suffered a major setback in the war by losing these vehicles. Indeed, the BMP-3 seconds are a modernized system combining the best of infantry fighting vehicles, fire support vehicles, anti-tank vehicles, and amphibious personnel carriers. The Russian state defense system has declared that the BMP-3 infantry vehicles have a speed of about 43 miles per hour and a cruising range of 370 miles. The Russian army, already suffering from a shortage of equipment and ammunition, has compounded this problem with the loss of the BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles. The Ukrainian Air Force's operations are not limited to this. The Air Force recently blew up the Tor square meter air defense system of the Russian army. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a kamikaze drone was used in this operation. The General Staff added that in the last month alone, 44 air defense systems of the Russian invaders were destroyed. Tor air defense systems are of great importance for the Russian army because the Russian army can prevent the attacks of the Ukrainian Air Force with these systems. The destruction of these systems, which are designed to hit air targets, means that the Russian army will be weakened in preventing Ukrainian air attacks. This will cause a major setback in the war because the most effective form of attack in the Russian-Ukrainian war is undoubtedly airstrikes. Many reviews of air-to-air defense systems have been written in Russia. In an article published in one of the Russian state news agencies, the Tor square meter air defense systems were mentioned as follows. The state-of-the-art Tor square meter is capable of timely detection of all types of drones. Despite this statement, the Ukrainian army has destroyed hundreds of Tor square meter air defense systems belonging to the Russian invaders. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry talked about the Tor square meter air defense systems in a statement in recent months. The Tor M2 air defense system became the star of Russian television, but soon a Ukrainian plane intruded. Used it to Ukrainian artillery. It burned brightly. The fire extinguisher did not help. Thanks to its drones and kamikaze drones, the Ukrainian Air Force is inflicting heavy losses on Russian invaders. Recently, another successful attack of the Ukrainian Air Force was revealed in the footage shared on social media. In the shared footage, it is clearly seen that the armored personnel carrier of the Russian invaders, which was advancing in a village in the Donbass region of Ukraine, was blown up. Kamikaze drones were also used in the attack, which was recorded by an unmanned aerial vehicle camera. The 3 occupying soldiers in the armored personnel carrier of the Russian invaders were blown up along with the vehicle when Russian leader Vladimir Putin began his invasion of Ukraine. He never imagined that he would suffer so many casualties. Putin had in mind that the Ukrainian army would surrender after a few weeks of aggression. But the Ukrainian leader Zelensky's determination against the invasion and the support of his people surprised Putin. In addition, military aid from the Western European countries has strengthened Ukrainian army. Russian leader Putin was helpless in the face of all these developments. He received no support from his people. Unlike the support given to Zelensky after Putin started invading Ukraine, the Russian people even organized protests on the streets of Russia to demand an end to the occupation. Russian youth did not want to join the army for Putin's political career and personal interests. Military personnel recruitment centers in Russia were set on fire. Faced with many unexpected developments, Putin was cornered. Putin asked China for help to continue the occupation, but China stated that the occupation must end another country. Putin asked for help was Belarus. Although Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko seemed to welcome Putin's request, he hesitated to take a concrete step. The recent uprising in Belarus made support for Putin impossible, to the point that Lukashenko may soon ask Putin for support. The losses of the Russian army have increased even more with the recent attacks by the Ukrainian Air Force. Putin's need for military personnel and equipment to continue the occupation is increasing day by day. According to the latest data showed, the losses of the Russian army are as follows: 178,820 military personnel, 3,637 tanks, 7,028 armored combat vehicles, 2,750 artillery systems, 534 reactive spread fire systems, 282 air defense systems, 307 aircraft, 292 helicopters, 5,607 automotive and tank equipment, 18 military ships and boats, 911 cruise missiles, 2,323 unmanned aerial vehicles, 311 special machines, and 4 operational tactical missile systems. It seems unlikely that the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, will continue the occupation with these losses. What are your thoughts? Can Putin solve the problem of military personnel and ammunition? How do you interpret the success of the Ukrainian Air Force? What are your thoughts on the course of the war? The competencies and skills of generals are more important than army forces. Even if you have the strongest army in the world, if your generals are bad, the army against you can defeat you with the right strategies. This is exactly what Russia has been experiencing since the beginning of the Ukraine war. The notables of the Russian army acted rather amateurishly and indisciplined throughout the war, so much so that Russian President Vladimir Putin dismissed many such unsuccessful generals throughout the war. We talked about the incompetence and lack of discipline in the management level of the Russian army. In our previous videos, it seems that these incompetent commanders have taken the initiative in losing the war and doing things that the whole world will condemn. Let's examine the developments about the situation of the generals of the Russian army and the psychological and strategic collapse of the Russian army. Together, the Russian lieutenant general who ordered the bombing of civilians in the Donetsk region and led the attacks on the Avdil steelworks in Mariupol will be put on trial. Prosecutors from the pro-Russian District Prosecutor's Office in Donetsk submitted an indictment to the court as part of a special preliminary investigation into the commander of the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army of the Southern Military District of the Russian Armed Forces from February the 24th, 2022 to May 2022. In accordance with the orders of the military and political leadership of the Russian federal state, he personally supervised the units subordinate to him during the seizure of the territory of the Donetsk region. The commander of the Russian army deliberately violated the order to change the territory of Ukraine or state borders. Part 3 of Article 110 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. Part 2 of Article 28. Part 2 of Article 437. Leading to the death of people and other serious consequences. Accused of committing acts, the pre-trial investigation was carried out by the lieutenant general while he was at the command post of the Russian army in the villages of Mariupol, Manhushnikolsk, Starokrym, Kalchik-Shevchenko, Jovniv and Pryazovsky of the Mariupol district. He revealed that he was responsible for the coordination, management and military planning of Russian military formations. He also ordered the bombing of civilians in the Donetsk region and the seizure of the territory of the region. The accused attended a meeting with the heads of the so-called Donetsk Republic and the Chechen Republic of the Russian Federation and developed a plan for the complete capture of besieged Mariupol and a raid on the coastal metallurgical plant where the personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine were located. After the attacks, civilians were trapped in partially destroyed bomb shelters. The general also coordinated the actions of subordinate formations to intensify the attack on the enterprise and kill the leadership of the Ukrainian military units. Earlier, the commander of a tank battalion of the Russian armed forces was sentenced to 11 years in prison for shooting at a multi-story residential building in Chernihiv. The names of the generals mentioned have been kept secret, but these two cases are the best examples to show us the point of the war. It seems that these generals deliberately harmed the Ukrainian people throughout the war and indirectly involved the innocent Russian people. The Ukrainian army turned into one of the most elite armies in the world after it was equipped with Western weapons and received training from Western countries. However, it cannot be accepted as a normal situation for the Russian army to act like the armies of underdeveloped states against the Ukrainian army. So what exactly is going on in the Russian army? The Russian army's unprepared start to the war, and the indiscipline and incompetence of the officials in the army mark the beginning of the collapse of the Russian army. The negative orders given during the conflict, the lack of coordination, and the Russian soldiers disobeying the orders of their commanders in time caused a small-scale rebellion in the army. With the partial mobilization decision announced by Russia last autumn, 300,000 Russians were recruited into the army and sent to the front with half training and almost no ammunition. And then these soldiers, defying the command or fleeing from their troops, is one of the main reasons for these rebellions. The Ukrainian army started a project called I Want to Live after Russia's partial mobilization decision. The aim of the project was to leave Ukraine intact and reunite with their families, demobilized Russian soldiers who did not want to fight. At this point, that I Want to Live project has received more than 15,000 calls, and the mobilized soldiers who still wanted to get rid of the front are calling that I Want to Live lying and asking for help. Not only soldiers, but also some high-ranking officers applied to this line in this way. A Russian officer who surrendered to the Ukrainian forces exposed what happened in the Russian army. The Russian commander who surrendered declared that the Russian soldiers shot and blew themselves up rather than fighting in a war. Vladimir Putin's army seems to have suffered a startling collapse, with Ukraine estimating that it had retaken about 3,000 kilometers from them. Last week's attack caused thousands of Russians to flee desperately to escape the conflict, leaving huge amounts of weapons behind, however, as some soldiers had to take their own lives rather than face the Ukrainians. According to 24-year-old Russian Lieutenant Ilya Yun, his unit, severely depleted during the war, found itself surrounded. Of the 12 people, 3 were caught. The others died. Moreover, some shot themselves and blew themselves up. The lieutenant said he would go to the relatives of the deceased soldiers and tell them how their son and husband had died. The Ukrainian offensive marks the most dramatic change on Ukrainian soil since the start of the war in February. In response, Putin ordered missile strikes on Ukrainian cities and plunged 9 million civilians into darkness. After his troops fled in a humiliating retreat, UK intelligence reveals the scale of the recaptured Ukrainian territory, including the key city of Izium, to be twice the size of Greater London. Ukraine has displayed some of the abandoned Russian military equipment that it has received in recent days, and it is estimated to be worth around £111 million. Stories of panic-filled scenes emerged amid Russia's collapse on the Eastern Front as Putin's soldiers fled their former strongholds. Reports claim that Russian soldiers looted clothes from Ukrainians' homes in order to disguise themselves as civilians and stole bicycles in desperation to escape. And their ill-equipped and inexperienced fighters were reportedly abandoned by their commanders in Russia. According to a Ukrainian in a newly liberated village, villagers said that although they feared Russia's brutal soldiers, they finally felt pity for them, and that half of the soldiers had left their vehicles in the first few hours of the Ukrainian attacks. Some of the remaining soldiers radioed their unit commanders desperate to send someone to help them. The Russian authorities told the soldier that you are alone and came to the civilians' homes to buy clothes so that the drones would not see them in uniform. Russian soldiers were not only limited to clothes, they also stole the bicycles of some of the civilians. Some soldiers threatened civilians with guns to take their cars. Experts claim that we are witnessing the beginning of the end of Russia's war. While Russian soldiers lay down a large amount of weapons in the face of the Ukrainian offensive, even more embarrassing footage has emerged of a Russian fighter jet crashing to the ground in a giant fireball just after takeoff. Their collapse rate was so fast that heaps of ammo and even half-eaten food were left behind. This is officially the beginning of the end of the Russian army. They were literally fleeing their positions, leaving their belongings, and heading to areas under Russian control. This situation of the Russian army, of course, is a unique opportunity for the Ukrainian army. The fact that the Ukrainian offensives that will begin soon will take place in such an environment is equivalent to the appearance of a bright white light at the end of the road to the victory of the Ukrainian army.